Box Star Forum, what's going on? It's your boy Terry L. We're back at y'all with another one, boxing news for y'all. Before I begin, hit the like and subscribe button, support the channel, hit the bell icon. You know what to do. Leave your comments below after this next podcast. We're going to leave it in. We're going to put it all in on the line for y'all. We're going to talk about the saga that seems to be rambling on. Will it happen or will it not happen in the sport of boxing? It's the fight none other between Terence Crawford and Earl Spence Jr. Now, recently there's been a talk in the boxing circles about the split or the proposed split between Terence Crawford and Earl Spence Jr. Now, what's been circling out there is a split of 60-40 in favor of Earl Spence Jr., so, i.e. Earl Spence Jr. takes 60% of the purse and 40% of the purse goes to Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford has bolted that and said, no, not happening, not having that. Back in April of 2021, if y'all remember, earlier this year, Bob Arum, obviously when Terence was signed with Bob Arum at Top Rank Boxing, Bob Arum suggested that a 40-40-20 split, 40% for each fighter, and the remaining 20% goes to the winner, which is no different than the 60-40 split. However, Bob Arum said the 20% goes to the winner of the fight. So if Earl Spence Jr. wins, he gets the extra 20%. If Terence Bud Crawford wins, he gets 20%. So that's not likely going to happen, especially now that Terence Crawford is a free agent and he's left Top Rank. Now, the reality is the two seem to want to fight, and it seems likely that the two can fight now that Terence Crawford has left Top Rank and he's a free agent, so he can negotiate pretty much as a free agent and on his terms. The skeptical people in boxing, in the boxing circles, believe that if Terence Crawford couldn't make it happen with Bob Arum, the chances are it won't happen without Bob Arum. They just don't see that Terence Crawford is savvy enough to make that deal happen. And also, there's talk that Terence Crawford is a bit arrogant. He's a bit bullish in his negotiations and not being very realistic in what the proposed fight should be in terms of the purse bids or the purse award per fighter. Now, let's get into the nitty gritty. Now, the WBO welterweight king obviously is Terence Crawford. Some say that's your true pound for pound fighter. Either one or two. He's either one in the world or he's number two behind Canelo Alvarez. It used to be Earl Spence Jr. above Terence Crawford, but it seemed to be tilting towards Terence Crawford, especially after he demolished Shawn Porter. As we know, Shawn Porter fought Earl Spence Jr. a couple of years ago, and that went the distance. And it was a rugged fight. Some believe that Shawn Porter could have tilted in his favor. I simply had it in Earl Spence Jr.'s favor because I didn't think Shawn Porter had done just enough or enough to win that fight. At the best, it could have been a draw, but I don't think it would have been a victory for Shawn Porter when he fought Earl Spence Jr. Now, it leaves no imagination as opposed to what Terence Bud Crawford did to Shawn Porter and whether or not he is a formidable opponent if he was to fight Earl Spence Jr. The problem lies in negotiation. The devil's in the detail. It's whether or not Terence Crawford believes hard enough that if he's the A side or the B side, he believes he's the A side, or it's even, or he just believes he should be awarded either as equally 50-50 split, which is probably the best thing for them to do, or have a slightly bigger purse bid or bigger slices of the pie going towards Earl Spence Jr. But the truth of the matter is, Earl Spence Jr. at the moment holds all the marbles. A, he's a bigger pay-per-view seller of the two fighters. He brings a lot of clout. The money seems to follow Earl Spence Jr. more so than Terence Crawford. And he's with the very savvy negotiator and businessman and a very big personality in the sport of boxing in Al Heyman. And Al Heyman is a legend. Now, as we know, Al Heyman gets people paid. and he gets fights done, whether you agree or disagree with the matchups, the reality is Al Heyman's fighters aren't walking around broke. They're actually well paid. And so too is Terence Crawford. Probably could have been a little bit higher in the purse ranking in terms of his filling his pockets up. He probably would have had the bigger paydays had he not been a Bob Arum. But nonetheless, he's a multimillionaire. So too is Earl Spence Jr. But the devil's in the detail. What do you think Earl Spence Jr. should do in a situation? He's in a situation where he's the IBF, he's a WBC and WBA champ. And I believe Ugas has the IBF strap. So if he beats Ugas, which he's claiming to fight in middle of next year, that means Earl Spence Jr. will have 3 of the 4 major belts. Now, Terence Crawford has only the WBO strap. Both are undefeated, both with sensational win records and knockout ratios. In terms of who is the most favorable fighter, that would have to be Earl Spence Jr. at the moment, purely because he has more belts and the money rests with Earl Spence Jr. And as we know in boxing, because boxing seems to favor the guy with the money, or where the money lies, it doesn't leave Terence Crawford with huge bargaining negotiations with one belt and not being a big pay-per-view fighter. Having said that, the fight most definitely will be on pay-per-view. It won't be on any other network, or definitely won't be on terrestrial TV. So there may need to be a bit of bending in terms of Terence Crawford if he really wants this fight to happen. He knows the boxing public wants to see the fight, and it's a fight that has to happen. I just hope that these two guys end up bending over to some degree of common sense and make this fight happen in 2022. I expect Ugas to be dealt a lesson by losing to Earl Spence Jr. I expect Earl Spence Jr. to step up and win in pretty good fashion against Ugas. However, it won't be an easy fight. However, in that sense, what does Terence Bud Crawford do in the interim? Does he wait? Does he take a mandatory defense title against whoever the WBO makes his mandatory challenger? There are some options for him. Does he vacate the WBO belt and leave the 147 pound and gets frustrated to go to 154, where there may be some bigger money fights for him at 154? He's also suggested that he could go to 154 to get a fight, I don't know, with one of the Charlo, I think Jamal Charlo's brother is still fighting at 154, 160. So that's a possibility. I hope that he stays at 147 because I think that's his best weight. And I hope that he stays at 147 and gets that fight with Earl Spence Jr. But he can also fight Danny Garcia. And that's a big money fight for him. That's a good fight for him. Terence Crawford, that is. And let's just see what happens in regards to negotiation skills. Whatever happens, Earl Spence Jr. is in no rush to concede to the demands of Terence Crawford because he doesn't think that Terence Crawford is on the right side of the negotiation table. The truth of the matter is Terence Crawford is on the B side. And when you're on the B side, as you know, in boxing, you have to sort of give in to the A side. Mayweather did it a number of times. He did it especially when he fought against Oscar De La Hoya. He knew he was the B side fighter, had everything from the gloves chosen for him, the size of the ring, the venue, yada, yada, yada. And that's what happened when you're the B side. As soon as he beat Oscar De La Hoya, he became the A side and stayed the A side until he retired. So until you get to that stage, you're going to have to take what the A side gives you to some extent. So let's just see what happens. That's my take on it. I hope that the fight can be made, but we're a long way from making this happen, especially now that Earl Spence Jr. is going to fight. It seemingly he's going to fight Ugas, and then we'll go from there. That's all I got for y'all right now. That's me. I'm out for now until I come back to y'all with another one. Stay tuned to the channel, more boxing content. Support the channel, hit the bell icon, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments until I come back to y'all with another one. I'm out for now. Peace.